GamingBolt presents 15 amazing Far Cry facts you probably didn't know. The Far Cry series contains 5 superb games that aren't related to each other very much at all, but there are plenty of secrets hidden within each game. Here are 15 facts you likely don't know about Far Cry. VASS almost wasn't in Far Cry 3. Michael Mando, the actor behind the brilliantly disturbing VASS, originally auditioned for another character, but the actor's performance was so good that the developers created a new character especially for him, one that would take advantage of his performance, and the end result was the tyrannical VASS. Far Cry 3 was almost a very different game that would have tied its narrative to those of the first 2 games. Far Cry 3 isn't directly tied to the other games in the series, but it very nearly was. The original story didn't include Jason Brody or VASS, but focused on tying the first 2 titles together. The end result was clearly the way to go, starting a trend that makes each new entry in the series a fresh, new experience. The language used in Far Cry Primal is based on an ancient European language called Proto-Indo-European. The ancient language spoken by the tribes in Far Cry Primal is actually based on an ancient dialect known as Proto-Indo-European. Not only did the developers bring in linguists to create the language, but 3 different versions were created as well, one for each of the 3 tribes in the game. Far Cry 4, you will sometimes find malaria pills in loot, referencing Far Cry 2. While wandering the mountainous world of Far Cry 4, you'll occasionally stumble upon malaria pills in loot. These aren't all that useful, but are a reference to Far Cry 2. In that game, your character was sick with malaria and needed to constantly find malaria medicine to stay alive. Xenomorph egg in Far Cry Blood Dragon. Tucked away in one of the corners of Far Cry Blood Dragon is a reference to one of the greatest science fiction films of all time. A xenomorph egg can be found, a strange pink light seeping out of the cracks at the top. It's a great nod to a relic of the 70s. The voice of Adam Jensen in Deus Ex originally voiced Jason Brody in Far Cry 3, but was replaced after Ubisoft feared the 2 characters would sound too similar. Jason Brody, the hard-headed protagonist of Far Cry 3, was originally voiced by Elias Toufexis, who also voiced Adam Jensen in Deus Ex Human Revolution. As the game neared completion, the developers feared that Jensen and Brody would sound too similar, so Gianpaolo Venuta was brought on to voice the character instead. VASS's definition of insanity speech was recorded in a dark studio with the actor talking to a tennis ball on a pole. VASS's speech on the definition of insanity quickly became one of the most memorable pieces of dialogue from Far Cry 3. The speech was filled with tension and emotion, but the scene was actually filmed in a dark studio with actor Michael Mando ranting to a tennis ball on a stick, making for a slightly less dramatic moment. Near the end of Far Cry 3, Jason Brody loses his left ring finger, which was meant to reference other Ubisoft titles, Assassin's Creed and Brothers in Arms. As Far Cry 3 nears its conclusion, Jason Brody loses his left ring finger. While this may seem like a surprising moment in a story filled with twists and turns, it also serves as a reference to 2 other Ubisoft series, Assassin's Creed and Brothers in Arms. It's a subtle but clever way to recognize other fantastic franchises the developer has under its belt. Ubisoft had originally planned to make Far Cry 4 a direct sequel to 3. After the success of Far Cry 3, Ubisoft toyed with the idea of making Far Cry 4 a direct sequel, continuing the antics of Jason Brody. This direction was scrapped rather quickly though. After the success the 3rd game had with an all-new location, visiting yet another new locale seemed like a more exciting choice. When Troy Baker auditioned for Pagan Men, he quickly ditched the script and instead tortured the people in the room while staying in character. Troy Baker is terrifying as Pagan Men in Far Cry 4, but he was scaring people as the power-hungry dictator before he even got the role. During his audition, he ditched the script and became verbally torturing people in the room, going so far as to threaten to remove one woman's skin when she walked in to hand out refreshments. Far Cry 4. Herc mentions one of his tattoo bros is Jack from Far Cry 1. Herc is quite the character in Far Cry 4, but one small line of dialogue he mutters creates a connection to the first game in the series. His tattoo bro Jack he mentions is actually a character from the original Far Cry. Is this confirmation that all of the games exist in the same universe? Does that mean we might get aliens in a future Far Cry? Original Far Cry started as a project called EXILE. Before Far Cry became the game that we know today, it started as a project called EXILE. It was playable, allowing players to wander through a gorgeous island observing dinosaurs. This was eventually scrapped for the enemy-ridden island of Far Cry we know and love. The end of Far Cry 2 is set in an area called Heart of Darkness, directly referencing the events and the name of the Joseph Conrad novel. The Joseph Conrad novel Heart of Darkness is about an expedition down a river in Africa. As the expedition continues, the expedition and the crew grow more chaotic. The final area of Far Cry 2 is named after the novel and even follows the themes and events of the book closely. Far Cry 4. The GPS locator given to AJ in his first mission is the locator from Far Cry 2 with the screen smashed. The GPS that AJ is given in the first mission of Far Cry 4 is actually the locator from Far Cry 2 with the screen smashed in. It's a nice nod to one of the best games in the series. It might have been missed by many, but these small connections between the games are still fun inclusions. If the player follows Pagan's instructions at the beginning of Far Cry 4, they will be treated to an early ending. In the beginning of Far Cry 4, Pagan Min takes you captive and brings you to an exquisite dinner. Something happens and he promptly leaves, asking you to wait until he returns. If you actually wait for him, you are treated to a quick ending. He takes you to your mother's grave, and you can pay your respects as the song "Should I Stay or Should I Go" blares over the speakers. And that'll be about it for this one. If you guys like what we're doing at GamingBolt, please consider subscribing to our channel, and I'll see you guys on the next video.